So since the launch of this series a year ago, some of you have attended. We've had AI and how it's applied in the provision of healthcare, AI in higher education. We've had a session on impacts on the workforce. So just trying to bring those conversations and that shared learning to bear. We make this series a free event series so that we can have as many people attend as possible, both in person and virtually. And to do that, we're grateful to two sponsors that we have for this series, both of whom are deeply involved in championing the application of AI within their companies and their industries. So we're grateful to Comcast Business and to Sanofi for their generous support and sponsorship of this series. And with that, to kick us off, I'd like to welcome Kristen Christopher, who is the Vice President, State and Local Government and Community Affairs at Comcast, to give some opening remarks. Kristen, give it up.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. As Jim said, my name is Kristen Christopher. I'm the Vice President of Government and Community Affairs for Comcast here in Massachusetts. On behalf of Comcast Business, I'm delighted to welcome you to today's discussion, AI as a driver of economic growth in Massachusetts. We're proud to partner with the Greater Boston Chamber of Commerce for the second year in a row on this very important conversation and to support the Chamber's broader AI Advantage series. Our partnership with the Chamber helps to make us this impactful event series free and open to the public, allowing the most accessible format that reaches a broad audience, both in person and virtually online. At Comcast Business, we work with organizations of all sizes, from startups to global enterprises, to deliver the secure, high-performance connectivity intelligent solutions they need to innovate and grow in this increasingly AI-driven world. That's why we're especially proud to support conversations like this and bring together leadership shaping the future of technology and the economy. Massachusetts is uniquely positioned to lead in this space with world-class talent, research institutions, and an innovation ecosystem that touches every sector of the economy. Today's conversation is an important opportunity to explore how we can build on those strengths, accelerate adoption, and ensure that AI-driven growth is broad-based, inclusive, and sustainable. We're grateful to the Chamber for convening leaders from across industries to share perspectives and real-world insights, and we're excited to learn alongside all of you today. This year, Comcast Business is co-sponsoring this AI series with Sanofi, and I'm excited to pass this over to Tanisha Sullivan to introduce the panel. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Kristen. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for that. So I'm Tanisha Sullivan. I am the head of external engagement and health equity strategy with Sanofi. And I do want to start at the top by, of course, thanking the Chamber. Thank you, Jim. Thank you, Danielle. Thank you, Ange. I know they're floating around here for the work you do every day to convene us for these very important conversations. I also want to, of course, acknowledge Kristen. Thank you for what Comcast is doing in this space as well. It's certainly an honor for us to be a part of this series, right? Because this is a learning journey for all of us. And we're looking forward to the conversation. Before I introduce the panel, and it is a very distinguished panel, I do want to provide you with a little bit more information about Sanofi. Sanofi is a global biopharma company. We are driven by a very clear mission. Our mission is to chase the miracles of science so that we can help to improve the lives of patients all over the world. Our DNA here runs very deep. And although we operate in over 100 countries around the world, we've got deep roots here. Through Genzyme, one of the pioneers in the biotech revolution. As we celebrate Biotech 50, I've got to give a shout out to that. Genzyme was acquired by Sanofi in 2011 and is the organization that brought Sanofi to Massachusetts. We have major research, development, and manufacturing operations here in Massachusetts, over 5,000 employees, a 2.3 million square foot presence. Several of our rare disease treatments are actually manufactured right in Framingham. So this is really home for us. And one of the things that has become very clear to us as an organization and to our industry as a whole is the power that AI has to really transform the way that healthcare is not only delivered, but also the way that we discover some of the most important treatments of our time. And so at Sanofi, we do believe that AI's greatest value is realized when it improves patient outcomes, when it shortens the path to diagnosis, when it expands access to breakthrough therapies, and when it helps to close persistent gaps in health outcomes. And that's why for us, responsible AI, grounded in ethics, grounded in transparency, with an unwavering focus on equity, must be the center of how we build and deploy these tools. And so for us, collectively as a Boston business community, this really is a defining moment. The choices we make now about investment, collaboration, and workforce development will determine not only how Massachusetts leverages AI, but how we lead in this very important moment. And that is what we're going to focus on today. So it is truly my pleasure to introduce the speakers who will guide us through today's discussion. AI as a driver of economic growth in Massachusetts. Our panel brings together leaders from across industries who are actively thinking about and working on how AI is shaping business strategy, workforce development, and economic competitiveness right here in Massachusetts. We are honored to be joined by Eric Paley, our Secretary of Economic Development here in the Commonwealth. Eric brings a statewide perspective on how AI can strengthen competitiveness, accelerate innovation, and drive economic growth across industries. We're also very pleased to be joined by Sabrina Mansour, Director of the Massachusetts Artificial Intelligence Hub. Sabrina and her team are leading efforts to position Massachusetts as a global leader in applied AI and to ensure businesses, institutions, and communities can fully participate in AI-driven economy. And of course, our conversation today will be moderated by none other than Jim Rooney, President and CEO of the Greater Boston Chamber of Commerce. And of course, Jim's leadership continues to bring together all of us as a business community, government leaders, and innovation leaders to help shape the future of our region's economy. Together, these speakers offer a powerful mix of policy, innovation, and business leadership. And we are so grateful for your willingness to share with us today on how Massachusetts will have the AI advantage. And we are going to begin with remarks from Secretary Paley.
Thank you so much. It's great to be here with all of you, especially just to thank you out to Jim Rooney. I've only been in this job a short period of time. Jim very generously at his interview with the governor with 700 people in the room said his new best friend, Eric Paley, and called me out. But I really do feel that way. Jim has done an incredible job just being a real partner from minute one, the second I took this job. We knew each other a tiny bit from some work we did together years ago, but he's just been incredible. So I'm very grateful for that. AI is one of my favorite topics. I'm eager to talk about it. I did think it might help to start with just a little backdrop on where we are on the economy right now, and then we can shift into AI, and then we'll talk about the panel, and my colleague Sabrina Mansour and I will join Jim in a deeper discussion. But just broadly, where are we today? Massachusetts has unbelievable strengths. I think we all know this, right? We're number one on all kinds of metrics that any state would trade with us in a heartbeat on. Number one in healthcare, number one in education, top few, maybe number one in climate, depending on which list you look at. We have the second longest life expectancy. We have unbelievable institutions, universities, Life science industry and biotech is unmatched globally. Our defense sector is actually often overlooked, but it's actually as big as our life sciences industry. It's huge in Massachusetts. So we have these strengths. We also have a whole set of challenges. But a lot of people ask me as I started this job, are we in a recession yet? I thought that was very Massachusetts. To start off with like being as tough on ourselves as we possibly be. So I went to work trying to understand where are we when I started this job 6 months ago. Not only are we not in a recession today, Massachusetts had the highest GDP growth of any state in 2025. So things are going really well overall, big picture in Massachusetts. So why do people think we might be in a recession, or why are people down on the economy? Some of it I really do think is like our resolve in Massachusetts to solve every problem and how hard we are on ourselves. And I often think we wouldn't be as advanced as we are as an economy if we weren't so hard on ourselves. So I'm grateful for some of that fortitude, but I also think it belies certain questions and fears and confidence. So when JP Morgan did a survey earlier this year, also backed by Ames survey, which had very similar data, Massachusetts business owners are 9% above the national average when asked the question, how is your business doing? So the lived experience of the Massachusetts business owner is things are actually going quite well. When they ask the same Massachusetts business owners, how is the economy doing? We are 9% below the national average on how the economy is doing. So think about that disparity. There's a real disconnect between the actual lived experience of how the business is doing and how we all feel the economy is doing. Well, what's the implication of that? It is very hard to invest in an economy that does not feel like it's going well. Even if your business is doing well, if you have enormous concerns about where the economy is going, there's a real reason to hold off on investment. And we see that in the job numbers, which have been pretty slow. They've picked up, actually. I like to say they picked up right when I started in this job in September. I'm sure I had plenty to do with it, but they started picking up in a decent way starting in the fall, but they've been very slow. And when I think about why, and I think about what's happened in Massachusetts, we have three core challenges, right? Number one is affordability, right? Led by housing, but also energy, healthcare. We have a whole set of affordability challenges. Number two is competitiveness. Other states are not standing still. They're really driving hard, and they're really trying to compete with us on every vector they can, from huge incentives, attracting business, to lower costs perhaps on energy and whatnot. They're coming after opportunity in a way that historically maybe we have not been as aggressive. And then the third one is the one that would be most proximate. Those two hit on long-term themes, most proximate to this moment and to 2025 data, right? Which is the headwinds of the federal government. And I often think if I was back being a business owner, which I was only 7 months ago, so not very long ago, what would have been on my mind? Well, would have started with tariffs. That created enormous volatility, followed by the attacks on the research economy. We are disproportionately affected by that in Massachusetts. It is a huge portion of our economy, but the dollars being pulled out by the federal government broadly against academic research affect us more than any state in the country. So it wouldn't be surprising as a business owner, you'd find that concerning. Third one would be immigration policy. A lot of our businesses across the state have immigrant workers. We are the fifth biggest immigration state in the country by percent of population. By the way, massively outperformed on entrepreneurship, right? It's 17% of the population, 28% of the business starts are immigrant starts. So you can see why that would affect psychology and concern. Then we've seen a little business confidence improvement in the last few months, and now we have a new war and gas shock. So there are plenty of reasons for people to be concerned. What I'd like for folks to remember, though, is we are very lucky to be in Massachusetts. Overall, the economy is performing. The question is, what are we doing right now to overcome those challenges? And we really do need to be looking every day at how we overcome those challenges. I'm happy to go into depth on any of those, but I wanted to just give a framework for where we are. I'm very enthusiastic about the economy because there's no natural resource I would trade at all for talent. That is the number one most valuable natural resource any economy can have. I think we have the best talent in the world, right? And so I think we're well positioned for the long haul, but that doesn't mean in short order, there isn't a lot we need to do to be responsive to the challenges we're seeing. Okay, so talking about being responsive to challenges, let's talk about AI, because it's one of my favorite topics. And Jim and I have talked about AI a bunch. But I'm really, so I was a venture capitalist for the last 16 years. Before that, I was an entrepreneur. Even back when I was an entrepreneur, we were calling a lot of what today people would bucket as AI as data science. And I founded a company that was very deep in scene reconstruction, computer vision, using AI or data science or whatever you want to call that. So this has been an area of very strong interest for 25 years for me. I've also been lucky to be in what people would more modern call sort of last generation AI companies that have been very successful. Companies like Uber use data science to be very successful on the road. We were first round investors. The Trade Desk is the largest independent advertising marketplace, all using data science and AI to basically make those matches as efficient as possible for advertisers and media. Became worth tens of billions of dollars. So this is an area of personal passion. And what's happened with generative AI is just, it's a whole nother level of what's possible. But it raises all kinds of interesting conversation topics and a lot of fear. So I'll start by saying and acknowledging I am an AI optimist. I have a different view of AI than a lot of other people. And there are a lot of AI doomers out there. But what you see in Silicon Valley more than anything else is AI maximalism, right? And there's a good reason for that. And probably many in the room don't remember this, but only 3 or 4 years ago, there was something called Web 3. How many people remember Web 3? Okay, so the internet was now supposed to be owned by creators, the entire internet. The internet was completely going to be revamped using crypto so that creators owned the internet. Okay, how many people think that's happened in the last 3 or 4 years? Okay, there are no hands, right? So the challenge with Silicon Valley is they have a maximalist incentive, right? Always to tell the story that will aggregate the most capital. And the story that will aggregate the very most capital today is that there will be no jobs in the future. AI will do everything for us. Sometimes that comes with a story of abundance, and sometimes that comes with a story of catastrophe, right? But either way, there's a maximalist story. I think AI is I often say this, but way broader and way less deep than most people think. So I actually think people will say, well, jobs in the trades are going to be safe. I think jobs in the trades will be affected by AI as much as any other jobs will be affected, right? But I also don't think they're unsafe. And I also think white-collar jobs are going to go through some level of displacement, but are going to look very different than what people think, and actually much more rhyming with what we've seen before. My most important lesson for AI, for anyone who's interested in listening, is putting our head in the sand is the worst thing we could possibly do. We are in a global economy. We compete with people all over the world. And the last thing we want to do is put our head in the sand, especially in an area where we have a unique opportunity to be leading, both on the ethics of it and on the economic innovation of it. We have both opportunities here in Massachusetts, and we want to lead in both of those categories, right? So what do we mean by that? Well, luckily, my predecessor, along with the governor, in the Mass Leads Act, which was the 2024 Economic Development Bill, authorized $100 million for the AI Hub. And that means we get to have Sabrina on our team, who's leading the AI Hub, which is a very big investment at a state level. That was a framework. That was sort of a skeleton by which we can actually start building all kinds of capabilities. So what have we done since? First, we created an AI Models Challenge. Why do we say AI Models Challenge? It's all about applied AI models for academics. Why did we do that? We did that because the place we think we're best positioned to win is in all of the areas where AI will change industries where we have leadership. So if you're going to create a biotech AI company, we think you'd be crazy not to do that in Massachusetts. Why? Well, we're the world leaders in biotech. Is that guaranteed? Are we entitled to that? No. But we are well positioned for that. So we want to support that. Same thing with climate tech. Same thing with defense tech. Same thing with robotics and physical AI. We are uniquely positioned in those categories. So we're very interested in this next layer of AI where we move away from just very broad-based models and move to applied models of AI. So we created that challenge. The next thing we did was we put up the ACRE, the AI Compute Resource, at the MGH PCC, which might be the worst acronym of all time, but it's the data center in Holyoke that's been a state-owned entity for some time. But what we did was partnered with Harvard, Yale. Actually, it was interesting to see an out-of-state terrific university join us, MIT, UMass, the UMass system, BU, Northeastern, to basically create an AI compute resource for academia and for startups. Okay, so now we're doing some good stuff. Things are actually starting to happen. The next thing that happens is a grassroots effort starts across the state called the AI Coalition. And we get behind that 100%. The AI Hub is 100% behind that. I'm one of the co-founders of that. This is the leaders in the tech industry coming together and saying, we need to be leading at this time if we want to win, and turning that into a grassroots movement where the up and coming talent is being embraced and brought in and being captured into this economy, right? And so that's what the AI Coalition is doing, led initially by Whoop, but it's a much broader initiative, although we're very grateful to them for the initial leadership. At the launch of the AI Coalition, we had the governor announce that every state employee, every single state employee would get an AI assistant in partnership with OpenAI and training to use it. Why do we do that? Well, we want services to be better for citizens of the state. We want people to be able to level up and do a better and better job and be more productive in their work. We want to set our employees up for the future in the state. But more than anything, we want it to model to every organization, small business, large nonprofit, hospital system, large corporation in the state, that we need to be leveling up the talent. We're in a global competition. We want people to be as capable, as productive as possible. The only way to do that is to get them using the tools. We're the first state in the nation to do that. There's no other state that's rolled out an AI system for every employee in the state government. The next thing we did is we announced that we had AI training available for every citizen, all 7.1 million citizens in Massachusetts, through a partnership with Grow with Google. We're the first state in the country to do that. Why do we do that? Well, it's starting to get obvious, I think, but we see this as a massive workforce development challenge. I largely believe the concept that it is much more someone who knows how to use AI that will take your job than AI that will take your job. I'm happy to talk more about why I believe that on the panel. But that skill set, we see it, by the way, right now in job listings. It is literally a vertical takeoff of job listings in Massachusetts where people are asking, do you have AI skills? What are your AI skills? And with that Grow with Google capability, you finish the course and you get a certification. You might wonder, like, is that really important to have a certification? Well, it depends what kind of person you are, what kind of work you do. For a lot of people, it may not matter that much. The skills are useful. But if you're trying to break into the workforce, you're trying to show that you've done more than just tried ChatGPT when you're talking about your AI skills, having that certificate can be incredibly valuable. So we've also sort of quietly announced, but not very publicly yet, but it's coming, a big accelerator initiative we're going to have in partnership with a really terrific world-class enterprise collaborator. I think I can say because it has been somewhat announced, but in partnership with Red Hat. The reason we like Red Hat is because they're the leading open source company in the world, and we see a lot of the advancement of AI in enterprise in particular being open source based. So the question is, how's the state doing on this? What I'll say is, I had some real anxiety when I started. We were not moving fast enough. We will always feel that way because AI is moving so quickly that we have to be keeping a rapid pace. But we've been rolling out capabilities very rapidly. I think the next set of questions will really come around our educational capabilities. What are we doing in education to make sure our students are armed for that future workforce with that skill set, while meeting the concerns that educators have about what AI means in schools? We need to do both of those things. So that's just a backdrop, I think, ahead of the conversation. I probably stole all of Sabrina's thunder. But this is some of the incredible work she's been doing at the AI Hub, and we're all very proud of it at the state level. I'm looking forward to the panel. We can dive deep on all kinds of why do I not think this is the end of white-collar jobs? Will AI kill all of us? All the things we're all worried about. But ultimately, I think the biggest point I would just make is we have to lean in aggressively if we want to be competitive and win. And AI is a huge opportunity for Massachusetts, and we need to embrace that opportunity. Thank you.
Okay. Yep. So thank you, Secretary, for that, for those remarks. And I think what I'd like to do is, give you time to catch your breath and just ask Sabrina, maybe introduce yourself and talk a little bit more about the AI Hub, the work of the AI Hub. What's going on right now and what are your objectives?
Sure. There we go. Okay. So Sabrina Mansour, I joined as the inaugural director of the Hub almost a year ago now. I can't believe it. A couple of weeks away from that. And we really got started on a moving train, of course, because of the work that a strategic task force had already put into motion around recommendations and a strategic vision for the state. We organize ourselves around several pillars. So compute, data, talent, accelerating innovation, and leading responsibly with AI. And so, each of those pillars, right, we organized and we talked about what is going to actually move the needle for Massachusetts. What are the infrastructure plays that we can make on the state side to be able to move ourselves forward? And so a number of the initiatives, the secretary's already, shed light on, and those are either launched and we're, scaling or they're growing. Things that are coming down the pipeline, right? So internships, fellowships, at the high school level, at the college level, graduate level, right? Being able to make sure that we find, students who are wanting to stay here. The Secretary talked about, a lot of the great metrics that we have, but we do lose a lot of students, right, as they graduate. And so thinking about meaningful ways we can keep them here and have them build community around here. In terms of workforce development, working with organizations to help companies be able to identify the skills that they have. That's really hard for companies to articulate for themselves. They've got employee bases that are all over, a bell curve in terms of willingness to engage and adopt with AI. Some are fearful, some are already leaning in and off to the races, right? So helping them be able to identify those skills, communicate those skills out to, the educational institutions who are looking to build curriculum today and need that signal to best prepare the students for the workforce. And so, we collaborate across the state government, reporting into economic development, but we collaborate closely with education, with labor and workforce development. We take advantage of the great network that we have, right, through the mass hire organizations to make sure programs like the Grow with Google program is reaching across the state and looking to responsibly lead in terms of standing up these infrastructure plays so that we can equitably reach the entire constituency.
Thank you. So I get to deal with chamber presidents and governors all over the country. Most recently, Governor Beshear in Kentucky, Governor Abbott in Texas. Every governor is going to win the AI race. Every chamber president is trying to develop the tools necessary for their region and their state to win the AI race. What does that mean? I've heard our own governor talk about it. What does it mean? I mean, define that a little. Take it from the abstract of win some race to, what does success look like in winning, if that's the right word for it, in this sort of new phenomenon?
So I think there are a lot of.
Are you agreeing?
Here we go.
Yeah.
Now we got it. I think there are a lot of metrics, and I always get a little nervous when we simplify to singular metrics. You might optimize, and I'll give you an example actually in a moment. But I think the biggest enabler of GDP growth going forward in this next phase, I can't say forever, is actually going to be how we apply AI, right? And that will be true for our biggest, I was at one of our largest defense contractors today in the state. If they don't apply AI successfully, they're not going to grow as fast as their competitors. So I think across the state, we need to see a level up on these skills on every metric. And I think we're going to see across every type of organization. And I think we're going to ultimately see that in GDP growth. The simplification would be, well, Eric, what about if we get tremendous GDP growth and we don't get any job growth? Because that's a little bit of what, last year's concern was, although it started picking up at the end of the year. And so I do think over time, and we can get into the jobs conversation because I think it's important, it's very hard to grow over time without actually investing in your business and investing in human talent. And I really do believe that will continue to be true, even though I know a lot of people disagree with me. So I think I like to see that or believe that is a leading indicator, but you can't oversimplify to a single metric. But that would be the one if I had to pick a metric that I think is going to be most affected, right? I think if you look at all of the best institutions in Massachusetts, if they do not figure out on their own how to succeed with AI, they will be beaten by rivals elsewhere. So if the Cleveland Clinic is way more sophisticated than MGB over the next decade, they will accelerate their research. They will accelerate their success. I hope this isn't the case, so I'm not trying to pick on MGB, but it's a good example because it's the largest employer in the state. And I think we will see a difference in those outcomes if they're not embracing this technology the way others, leading with this technology is really where we need to be.
Rena, do you have a thought on what success looks like?
Yeah, so I 100% agree with the Secretary's comments, right? You got to cannibalize your own products and think outside the box, right? How can I not only bring AI into, the operations and processes that I have, but what are the new opportunities, right? With AI, what's possible now that wasn't possible before? So challenging everyone definitely to come at it from that perspective, so that we are protecting what we already have here in the state. I also think success looks like now where we're able to have equitable access, right, as much as we can to compute, right? So it's not just Kendall Square, but in Worcester as well, right? And so that does take effort on the state side and collaborating with industry to make that happen, and that's going to lift everybody up as well.
I want to make one comment on that because I think if you look at the internet, in theory, it was incredibly democratizing. Access was largely, at least in the US, widely distributed. And yet the people who took the most advantage of it were the most advantaged people, right? And I think there's a danger with AI where you actually could see it also distributing an enormous amount of knowledge, capabilities, expertise. But again, the people who know how to use it most, get the most value out of it, are the folks who are most best positioned. So I think a lot of our workforce efforts that we need to be doing, and Sabrina, we're very actively working on this, is about trying to actually make sure that's not what happens, that these skills are broadly distributed. Free community college is a very big opportunity on a state level to make sure that's true. But we need to be doing a lot on that front to make sure that even though the tools are out there and largely available, that they're actually being utilized and embraced and leveled up across the whole workforce.
Secretary, in your comments and in your answer, you've emphasized several times applied AI, applications of AI. When I look at the way other states are approaching it, Virginia, for example, is trying to lead on data centers. I think they've got 20 under construction or in operation. You look at Florida, looking at semiconductors and so forth. I'm not suggesting we dismiss our role in those two, but is Massachusetts' place in the applications, and not necessarily, we may have some data centers, as you suggested, but not trying to lead in those spaces?
Yeah, so you're going to hear with AI is exactly what you heard with the internet. So let's take Amazon as an example. There are a lot of places to win as a state in collaboration with Amazon. You could have been the R&D hub, as Seattle was. You could have had Amazon warehouses. I'd rather be the R&D hub, but it still creates jobs. You could have been the folks who created the plastic packaging inside of every box. You could have created the boxes, right? You could create the logistics. To me, there's a hierarchy there in terms of where are the good jobs. There are better and worse jobs across that distribution, and also what works well in the most advanced versus less advanced economies. So when I go all over the state and I look, for example, at our manufacturing capabilities, what I see is we typically lose companies that are lowest cost commodity in, lowest cost commodity out type of manufacturing companies. Those are the ones that New Hampshire brags about getting from us. And that's frustrating, but that we see that, right? That's not surprising. But when you look at the most advanced manufacturing companies that need very good technical skill, they need engineering skill, they need really strong management capabilities around continuous improvement and involvement, they tend to do very well here. Right. And actually, if we stick with Amazon, there's a reason Amazon Robotics has produced over 1 million robots here in Massachusetts. It's a super cost conscious company, right? Very efficiency driven company. And they're manufacturing in one of the more expensive places to manufacture because the engineers are constantly bringing new technology into the robotics. And so you want to couple that as closely as possible. So the question starts to become, what is the most important input to the process? And do we compete well on that input? When it's intellectual capital, we compete really, really well, right? When it's low-cost commodities, not only does Massachusetts not compete well, but I would say that's a race to the bottom because that's a global competition and there are always going to be other countries that can produce more cheaply. So getting back to your question, Jim, people are going to brag about leading in AI, and they're going to say, we're leading because we have the data centers. And I'm not saying there's no value in the data centers, but to me, that's lower on the stack. It's a lower value place, and it's actually very commodity in based, right? It's where is the energy the cheapest, right? It's also commodity out. Where the data center is, I don't want to say is irrelevant, but is generally not the proximate question. How many of you know where the data center is for the ChatGPT system you're using right now, or Claude or whatever? Most people have no idea, and frankly, don't care. I've heard the argument a little bit that for autonomous vehicles, it's incredibly important because of real-time decision making. The reality is the latency of 5G from that vehicle is way bigger than the latency of time once it's connected to the net going to a different geography. Maybe not all over the world, but not far away, right? So I think you have to decide where you want to play. And I think for Massachusetts, we want to play, I think, at the top of the intellectual capital side of AI. It doesn't mean we don't want to be in any of the other parts of it, but I think that's where we want to win, right? It is the most important opportunity set for us. But Sabrina may have a different.
No, I agree. Applied AI is definitely our sweet spot, right? So if you think about the talent that we do have, the institutions that we do have, right, we are producing data. And the Secretary knows I'm passionate about the data discussion too, because that is the unrefined data that we are generating like no other, right, a place in the world. And so you have the talent, you've got the data, you've got the compute, and why I agree with his comments around the compute. We don't need to have the most compute, but think about how we're using our compute. We're collaborating across these amazing institutions. We're keeping a portion of this compute and making it available to the ecosystem so they can participate as well. So right, across these silos that we're able to break down by doing this shared model, it's incredible. And I'm so excited to see the applied AI applications coming out of it. They're already coming out of it, right? Yeah.
Sabrina, you mentioned one of your goals of the AI Hub is broad-based economic growth. And I'd like you to sort of probe that a little bit more. One of the things we hear about is this notion of a risk of a two-speed economy, the AI haves versus the have-nots. And, how do you deal with that, especially as you think about the corporate ability to invest versus the small business inability to invest?
Yeah, so I think the infrastructure is the answer there, right? So it's not, big versus small companies, but it's more who's got access to that compute and data to be able to do the AI development that they need to do. So again, that acre model is something I'd love to see us continue to scale, right? And we have plans to continue to invest and stay up with the latest compute, and that's going to make all the difference in the world to those companies.
I very much agree with the answer. We can keep going, but yeah.
Okay. All right. So is this on? Yeah, it's back. So we've got the people in the room, but a larger audience watching virtually, about 250 people. So, what is part of your message to people? They're here, they're interested in terms of moving forward in an AI economy. What would you ask them to do?
I would start by saying engage, right? Nobody today wants to hire someone to work for them who doesn't know how to use a computer or email or the internet. That's what this is, right? It is the next generation of that. Compute, if you wanted to be scared of compute, I always give this example, but you should have been terrified the first time you picked up a pocket calculator because it was able to do things you could never do well beyond human capability, right in the palm of your hand for $10 powered by the sun, right? That's compute. Okay, now, is the compute getting more and more sophisticated? Is it happening at an accelerating rate? Is there even more and more exciting things we can do with it? Yes. But the real challenge to everybody is to really engage. So, and chat with people about use cases. What do they do? So I'll give you examples of things I do. I now have to go all over the state, It's actually a great joy, but I go all over the state and 351 municipalities. And every single one of them, they have lots of stories to tell, and they have political scenarios, they have strengths, they have weaknesses, and ultimately each one has an economic development plan that I'm responsible for trying to support. So I get a brief every night. That's great. It's helpful, but it's relatively short. But I get in the car, and often that's a 2-3 hour ride, and I start a conversation with ChatGPT about, I remember my trip out to Munson, Mass. Okay, tell me about Munson, Mass. Like, tell me about the political situation there. What's that been like? Has there been any controversy? Economically, what matters to Munson? What projects haven't been successful that they're frustrated by? What are they waiting to see happen? In what ways are they happy with the state? In what ways are they frustrated with the state? So there I am in a 2.5 hour ride, and I can go as deep as I want to. Now, is everything ChatGPT tells me going to be right? No. I probably need to treat it a little bit like a pretty good intern, right? It's not going to be perfect, right? But I'm going to learn a lot in that conversation. That's incredibly helpful. I'll give you another example. I'll get one of these briefs. It's also my mind. And somebody will send me in the brief a report that was relevant in some way to the meeting I'm going to have. But this is not the report I need to pour over and get every detail of. Historically, some of them are long. They might be 60 pages of text. I might read the headlines or read the beginning of it, read the end of it. I now throw that report into Notebook LM, which is a Google product, and I have it make a podcast for me about the report. And, I'll listen to that podcast, like I said, a short, medium, long, 6 to 18 minutes. And on that ride, I'm getting all the details about something that may not be the most important part of what I'm talking about that day or going to engage, but really gives me a lot of background in a way that I find very easy to consume. These are just use cases, right? But they're really powerful use cases. I'll give you one more. I try not to read any articles during the day. I find it very distracting. People send me articles all day long. I find it very distracting to read articles during the day because I can get on a tangent very quickly. I have a lot of curiosity, so I can just completely sidetrack myself. So I have a discipline around that. What do? I throw it into Speechify. I get in the car and I turn on my Speechify and it reads me all of the articles that I didn't have a chance to read during the day. Those are just 3 little examples. I'll give you a government one and then I'll stop. Filling is now our Secretary of Transportation, but was is still also, but was the head of MBTA before he had that job. Phil figured out that he could use AI. So historically, every time they bought a car, a train car, they got a tremendous number of very expensive parts for backup because you can't send away to some other location every time something breaks. You need to have this stuff available. So they had warehouses filled with these millions and tens of millions of dollars, hundreds of millions of dollars worth of parts over time. So he started doing data analysis using AI on what parts do they really use and what parts do they not use. And the ones they don't use, they still get some of, just in case something goes wrong, but they know they don't use very many of those. Whereas the ones they use a lot of, they get a lot of. He has saved tens of millions of dollars for the MBTA using AI. And we had warehouses full, and he's got way smaller footprint now. So anyway, you have to talk to people about the use cases. You have to think about, okay, how do you translate that into your business every day? Because if you're not doing that, your competitor probably is. And it's an opportunity for real advantage in what you're doing.
Off. Okay.
Mic problem.
Yeah, right, one mic problem. Memo to self, stop sending Secretary Paley news articles.
No, I read all of them. Get read to me.
I
I don't miss an article.
I'm gonna ask for audience questions in a minute, but Sabrina, the topic you and the Secretary have mentioned, ethics and perhaps regulatory issues. We're in the middle of a conversation now about regulatory issues around data privacy that we think is economic growth inhibiting the way that Massachusetts is approaching it. And as we sit here today, there's more than 500 state and local pieces of legislation filed to regulate AI. Some of it, I think, out of fear more than sort of any kind of rationale. Talk a little bit about the balance between racing to sort of win something in the AI race from an economic development perspective, and those that want to race to win the regulatory kind of race, if you will, to be the most regulated state in data privacy, AI applications of technology. Yeah, oh yeah, you'll need that.
And I'll actually, yeah. I'll refrain from answering specifically on regulatory. Maybe the secretary might want to take that one. Not an elected official. We'll leave that to the elected officials to tackle. But I know it's a very, very important question. And
It's a smart move. He'll do.
It's an easy pass. But I will say, talking about companies adopting AI into their workflows, right? The governance policies that they put in place, right, for themselves is a really important topic. And, that's something that the hub looks to support companies as well as they take on that adoption, right? You want to be able to provide that type of guidance to your employees as well as opportunities for training and how to use it. And I think that support is available through the hub if for those who are seeking it.
Yeah, I would say on regulatory, I mean, a huge part of what we do at economic development is regulation, right? So we do regulation of the banks, we do regulation of insurance, I can go on and on and on. So I'll just tell you where I am in regulation. I think it relates very deeply to this, which is people groan, I think a lot of people groan about government, they're groan about regulation, but I think what gets lost in a lot of these conversations is what you're really trying to do is create trust, right? And trust actually is very enabling of commerce. So, we regulate weights and standards in the state. If every single time you pumped gas for your car, you had no idea if you were 20% overpaying, you'd probably want to figure out how to validate that. And you'd probably want to negotiate with the person you're buying gas from, and they'd want to negotiate with you because they want to make sure you don't get too much gas, unnecessarily on that. It's just an example, but a lack and anyone who's spent a bunch of time in a lower trust society with less rule of law, less regulation, you have a sense of the friction that gets created in those environments. So regulation can be really good, right, in creating trust. And we're looking for trust. We know there's a lot of apprehensiveness about AI. And for example, one of the state's policies on AI is that it cannot be used to spy on your employees. I won't use the word spy, but I'm trying to remember what the actual word is. But the idea is they're allowed to use AI without someone, basically having bossware over their computer of what's happening. And you can imagine if we did not have that policy, employees would be much more worried about, well, is somebody going to see every query I make? Am I going to look dumb asking certain questions? Am I look like I don't know how to do my job, right? And so they'd be more cautious. So what we're trying to do with all regulation is figure out the balance between trust and friction, right? Trust actually lowers friction, but if you put too much regulation in place, you can actually go beyond what creates trust, or you can have a lot of unintended consequences and create all kinds of other friction. So what we're trying to figure out how to do is how do we create regulation that both allows for innovation and allows for a leap forward of productivity while at the same time elevating trust. And that's the balance we have to figure out how to strike.
Any questions out there? Could you just identify yourself? Oh, then. Yeah.
Hi, Brendan Murphy. I'm with Comcast. So, the friction, that's a big deal. And we have 50 states, all 50 states doing their own regulation. And I understand we have to have trust, but we also want to be the state that does not make it difficult to grow and expand the AI opportunities. So what are your thoughts about first pursuing or adopting at a federal level the regulation?
So I think we're at an unusual moment on a federal level where the federal government in the state has never been less of a partner than today, right? And I think that creates a lot of interesting questions, right? And so I think if there was a great collaboration on this topic, it could be easier to just say, well, we'll just look to the federal government. And of course, there's a benefit in a singular set of rules for 50 states. But I think Massachusetts also has to look at its own values and make determinations about what matches with the state without, again, we are an innovative state. And there's a beautiful story, and I'm not the best person to tell it, about Cambridge winning in biotech because they set the right regulations. And they attracted researchers from all over the world by creating certainty, confidence in what the regulatory state would be, right? Within the confines of the city, but the regulatory regime would be. And so there are situations where it may make sense for the state to go out and lead on this. But I think on an ideal level, we would be able to do it all on a federal singular set of policies. I'm just not sure that's practical right now.
A couple more.
Thank you. Great panel. So it's probably been an hour and we talk about jobs and we talk about privacy, but I come to so many AI conversations and the environment's never discussed. And the cost, whether it's, you tell me if it's true, the cost of one ChatGPT search and the amount of energy that requires. Here, it almost seems that nationally, climate change has taken a back seat. So climate change is not one of the drivers of conversation, even by progressive people in a state that's progressive like Massachusetts. So how are you going to cut through this? It's much more than trust, right? You're not climate deniers up there, yet you haven't talked about it for an hour.
Yeah, so I'll jump in and say, oops. To an extent we're putting our money where, our beliefs are. And so the MGHPCC acronym, right? Mass Green High Performance Compute Center, that is solar and hydroelectric powered. It is carbon free. And that collaboration is a model that, I'm hearing time and time again now that nationally, internationally, the people are looking at that collaboration as an example. I think that individual, chat GPT, prompt you do is infinitesimally small compared to, the genes that you buy over the weekend. So I think you have to think about the broader activities as well. 100%, it's an important consideration as we think about the investments that we're making as a state in the hub's programming.
Yeah, so I guess I'd add a few things. I'm going to share this information because I think it is helpful to delineate what really is a big challenge and what really isn't a big challenge. People processing enormous amounts of data or building models are using extraordinary amounts of energy, and it is genuinely, there are real concerns that we got to be thinking about. The typical ChatGPT user who is using a free account, who maxes out their free account every month, does anyone have a sense for what cost of energy that roughly is? When I go around, sometimes I get like $50 a month, $100 a month. It's 50 cents a month. So, I used this example yesterday in a room full of PhD students, but if you have a mini fridge in your room, you're using, I don't even know, like, what is that, 10 times, 20 times the amount of energy from just using your mini fridge, keeping things cold, than maxing out your use of ChatGPT, which, by the way, most people don't do. So it's less the single query of each individual that's really the question, and much more the huge data sets, huge data models. Some of the things that will actually create some of the biggest discoveries are also going to be some of the most energy inefficient or carbon problematic factors. I am very glad what we're doing with MGHPCC is really about the state and our institutions, our major academic institutions, trying to scale up as much as possible as clean, carbon-free alternative to data as processing or compute as we possibly can. But it is a very big concern broadly across the economy, a little less so on a user level or worker level.
Okay, maybe one more if there is in the room.
Good afternoon. Alankrita Narang from Boston Harbor now. So a lot of the use case examples that you mentioned were about efficiency and productivity. Do you also see AI as a driver of potential new industries and growth in Massachusetts? And I would love to hear your thoughts on that.
There's no question. I mean, I think we talk about productivity partially because it's so universal to every single possible organization you can have, right? Anyone working anywhere can probably start to find a way to add AI to what they're doing in a way that is helpful and productive. But there's no question there will be whole new industries created because of the ability to process information and respond much, much faster, learn much faster, drive much faster. What we will see completely, I mean, some of it will be transformation of huge existing industries because human health is not going away as an industry. So it will continue to grow as an industry, and AI will transform that. But absolutely look at autonomous vehicles. It's a completely new industry that is driven by AI capabilities. Alongside that is a lot of climate concern that is completely legitimate. And so trying to figure out how we balance these things and work through that is going to be an important human question to solve for.
Well, it's been a fascinating hour, but Secretary, I'd ask you to take us home. You started by saying how optimistic you are. Yeah. Share more about that. Tell us why you're so optimistic about this.
So I think there's going to be job displacement. So I don't want to start by ignoring that there's going to be some job displacement, but I think it's going to look very different than what most maximalists are talking about. Why do I think that? Because the history of productivity, the history of technology is actually one where humans gain value, right? They actually get leverage, right? What did Steve Jobs say about the Macintosh? It's a bicycle, right? I think if you start with an assumption that AI will be smarter than humans at absolutely everything, you've started with a fallacy. We know there's many types of intelligences, but if you start with that, I understand, and that is the maximalist discussion as well. It will be smarter than us at everything. It's fascinating because it can't even sort my email correctly right now, right? So is it dumb? No, it's unbelievable at some things. By the way, a calculator can't sort my email well either, but I don't know the square root of 75,000, right? And it does instantly. So there are intelligences of different sorts where compute is incredibly powerful and somewhere it's not. What AI gives you more than anything is the most median answer to any question. It's like, but that's like, if you want to know what the absolute conventional wisdom is on something, AI tells you that. How does startups succeed? Just as an example, I've spent my career in that world. It's by being non-consensus. and right. Right? I think that's actually a very hard thing for an AI to do if you think about what it is and how it works. So when I think about what will happen over time, I think about two fallacies. One is this idea that AI is smarter than us at absolutely everything. I don't think that's true. The second one is that companies build their decision-making, their investment completely off their expense structure and only off their expense structure, right? I don't believe that to be true either. Companies usually build off their growth opportunity. So Whoop is a good example right now where they interviewed Will Ahmed and they said, well, if you just raised so much money and AI is such a big part of the story, why are you going to hire 600 people this year, which is more than you've ever hired in any previous year? And he said, well, we're trying to use AI to accelerate a 5-year roadmap into a 3-year roadmap. We need people to do that. We need people plus AI to do that, right? At the end of the day, he's trying to grow his business as successful as he possibly can. If every unit of productivity of every human becomes double, let's just say, you could say, well, can he cut the team in half? Sure, but he has the resources to invest in his business. His cost structure just went down. And if he can invest intelligently faster, he is going to, right? So there isn't like a fixed labor amount that, and so there's something called Jevons paradox. I don't know if people have heard of this, but it basically says, and it plays out very well in radiology. Radiology is the #1 area of AI use in healthcare. People predicted a decade ago radiologists wouldn't exist today. At this point already, they wouldn't exist. Demand has skyrocketed. There's more demand for radiologists than there's ever been. It's called Jevons paradox. The idea is as the cost of the labor goes down, the demand set actually increases, right? Because that labor produces more of value and the demand set is out there if the price points match and the capability matches. That's going to happen in almost every industry. Now, AI is very good at skills. It's also very bad at jobs. So if your job is a single skill, driving a car, think about operating a toll booth when Easy Pass came out. Technology can replace a skill quite reasonably. When you think about AI replacing a job, it is a lot harder to do. It doesn't mean a job won't be a combination of just a few skills, but the closer you zoom in on a job, and I'm sure this is true for almost everyone's job in the room, the more you see that a job is not just 1 or 2 or 3 skills, it's a lot of things. Many jobs are really about influence, much more than they're about anything else. And so those are jobs that I don't really think AI easily replaces. So there will be displacement. I don't mean to suggest there won't be. We do need to be thoughtful about it. But I see a different future. I see actually a future 10 years from now where unemployment is lower, not higher. But you can call me out on that when I'm wrong.
Okay, please join me in thanking Sabrina, Secretary Paley. And please join us for future conversations on AI and other of the Chamber programs where you can find out more about that on bostonchamber.com. And have a great rest of the day.